So, I want to preface this review by saying that I don't like to be negative about things. I don't get a kick off of hating stuff, I don't get a kick off of hating Disney Star Wars, and I don't really like making content that has a negative tone. I want to watch all of this new Star Wars content and be blown away and to leave feeling exhilarated, and I want to share my excitement with you guys about these things. And so it hurts me to have to sit here and say that the Mandalorian Season 3 premiere was really quite poor from my perspective. There were a multitude of factors that made this premiere and this opening feel disjointed, it felt whiplashy, it felt poorly written, and it felt inconsistent. And that is no fault of its own, that has a lot to do with the issue that came from the Book of Boba Fett. But to me, this opening just felt extremely lazy. Now, there are going to be spoilers ahead in this review for the episode, so you have been warned. So the episode opens on somewhere, I couldn't tell you what planet it was, and the armorer is slapping some metal over a forge, and she creates a helmet, and she takes it outside to a boy that's standing in a lake, and she puts the helmet on his head and makes him read his Mandalorian rights. Then, all of a sudden, this giant crocodile monster jumps out of the water and starts attacking all of these Mandalorians that are here for the ceremony. Now, this whole segment of the episode was okay. Yes, it was a little bit silly, but it was fun to watch. Although I did think the CGI on the monster crocodile looked a little bit wonky and a little bit awkward at times. And I say this comparatively because the Crate Dragon in Season 2 looked amazing. And I was also thinking to myself, these guys are the best of the best. They are the ultimate hunters. And they're all just kind of screaming, running around with blasters and explosives like headless chickens, running straight at the crocodile with pistols hoping to kill it. They also have a load of young Mandalorians right next to a little cave, and I was just confused why they weren't all running into the cave for shelter, because this monster crocodile was way too big. But of course, if they all ran into the cave, you wouldn't have this opening moment with the big monster. But they do need to be saved by none other than Din Djarin in his N1 Naboo starfighter, who arrives just in time. And by the way, the starfighter is still beautiful, I love it. He then flies past and he fires a torpedo at the crocodile, blowing it up, and there's loads of guts everywhere and whatnot. He then gets out of the cockpit and the armorer is like, screw you, I don't care that you've saved everyone, you took your helmet off, so go away. Now, like I said, I thought the opening of the episode was okay. I thought it was fun. Yeah, maybe some of the CGI looked a bit weak, and I thought at times the way it was shot was a little bit awkward. But my real issue here is the inconsistency within the narrative of The Mandalorian itself, because Grogu is just back. People should not have to watch an entirely different show about an entirely different character to learn why these two characters are back together from a cliffhanger ending in a previous season. The whole point of the Season 2 finale of The Mandalorian was to split these two characters up and then tell a story on how they're going to cope without each other and then their ultimate reuniting. But of course, that is the fault of the Book of Boba Fett, not actually this episode of The Mandalorian in particular, but criticism does need to be given to the writers, to Jon Favreau and Filoni, for thinking this was a good idea. To have this huge, significant moment dealt with off-show is lazy. And it just gives them an excuse not to tell that interesting story of them being separated, so they can just now have them together and pretend like it didn't really happen within the Mandalorian's narrative. In an interview, Jon Favreau said they needed to have them back together because the show is about them, but that should have been the plot. Like I said, the plot should have been how were they going to navigate the galaxy without each other, and then them coming back to each other. And this may be a tinfoil hat moment from me, but I think this was forcibly done by Disney. I think they coerced Jon Favreau and the writers into doing this, because Grogu is the draw for the general audience. And if you have a show without Grogu, or with a limited amount of Grogu because you're telling this story with them separated, I think Disney were worried that people wouldn't be interested in a third season. So I believe the higher-ups have basically just told Jon Favreau, look, you've got to rectify this in the Book of Boba Fett. We don't care how you do it. We just need these two characters together so we can market it in a certain way. And Jon just didn't have the time or space to do that reuniting with any nuance, so it felt rushed and it felt wrong. With that aside though, yes, the opening was pretty good, but things get really bad from here. So after the crocodile is killed, they walk into the cave and they discuss how the Mandalorian can earn his redemption, to which he is told he needs to go to Mandalore and to bathe in the waters of the mines. But it is explicitly stated that Mandalore is like a dead zone, it is poisoned, but Din states that he will find a way because this is the way. So I really thought to myself here, damn, okay, we're getting straight to the point, we're going to jump into the main narrative straight away, good for them. But no. The story decides to take a massive detour for some unknown reason and it baffles me because the detour is the most pointless thing I've ever seen, and it just sets us up for wonderful filler. The Mandalorian travels to Navarro, which is now a green, prosperous city instead of a downtrodden bounty hunter's haven, and he meets up with Greef Karga, and he's trying to tell Din to stay here and basically become our marshal, but the Mandalorian's like, no, I've got things to do. Now, like I said, this is the entire segment of the episode where it just felt like pure fanfiction. And what's worse, the entire episode was centered around this whole plot point. The writing was weak, it felt like a 5-year-old had written some of the dialogue. The performances were wooden, it didn't feel natural, it felt flat. And then it is revealed that the big reason we're wasting our time on this planet and wasting our time on this already extremely short episode was so the Mandalorian can get IG-11 back. Yeah, you heard me right. They are nostalgia baiting by forcibly and for no reason bringing back a character that died nobly in the first season. Because for some reason, Din needs this specific droid out of every droid in the Star Wars universe to travel across Mandalore safely. And it's extremely stupid because IG-11 was blown to smithereens in the first season, but his carcass is somehow displayed as a statue in the middle of Navarro, and he then takes it and literally puts 2 wires together and basically brings IG-11 back to life, making his sacrifice feel completely worthless. Anyway, when he puts the 2 wires together, IG-11 wakes up and basically goes on a rampage. He falls into his old bounty hunter routines, activates, and he tries to kill Grogu, so he's put down. So Greef tells him, well, I know some people that could maybe fix IG-11, and I'm thinking to myself, if he was so fixable, why didn't you just have him fixed in the first place? Why wait all this time? Anyway, he's given to a bunch of Babu Frick people from The Rise of Skywalker, and they then tell him he is gone. The memory core is destroyed. You need a new droid because this one is completely kaput. Now, logically, the Mandalorian in this moment should think, okay, the droid that I knew is gone, the memory core is destroyed, the personality is gone, I need to get a new droid. But no, this whole episode turns out to be the establishment of a goddamn fetch quest. And I kid you not, we've got our main plot points surrounding Mandalore and the redemption of Din Djarin, but now we're going to waste a bunch of episodes going on a fetch quest to find a new memory core for a destroyed droid. Because for some reason, Din needs the body of this droid, but with a completely new personality, so he can travel with him to Mandalore. And this is why I say it feels like fanfiction, because how goddamn stupid is that? Before we can actually get to our main plot and our main narrative, we need a fetch quest to get an old droid back instead of just getting a brand new droid and getting straight to the point of the story. I just don't know, it's so dumb to me. Anyway, they leave and start walking around Navarro, and it turns out there's a bunch of pirates that want to see Greef, but they're trying to get into a school that used to be the old bar in the early seasons of The Mandalorian. Greef then tells them that this isn't a bar anymore, it is now a school, but you can come back to my office and we can have a drink and a chat. But because every single character, apart from the main characters in the Star Wars, are completely stupid, they're like, no, we're going to go into this school for a drink, otherwise we're going to kill you. So a firefight breaks out and one of the pirates gets away, what a surprise, and when Mando leaves to go on his fetch quest, guess who comes back with a load of pirates? Yeah. So a little space battle ensues, and credit where it's due, you know, it's pretty fun. But one thing really stuck in my mind in this whole situation, because it was made very clear that the starfighter that Din Djarin has is one of the fastest things around. And instead of just using it to speed away from the pirates and not put Grogu's life in danger, Mando decides to have a dogfight with all of these pirates. But of course, he defeats pretty much all of them, but he's baited by the surviving one into confronting the big capital ship of the pirates, I guess. And the leader of these pirates reminded me of the aliens from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It looked really cheesy, but a part of me loved it. And then Mando just decides, you know what, actually I don't want to do this anymore, presses a button, flies off with super speed. which is exactly what I thought he should have done in the first place, but he decides to do it right at the end. It's little things like this that just annoy me because it's just logic, right? Like, yes, it's Star Wars, not all stories need to be super logical, you do need to have a bit of drama, but this is just simple. The whole point of the N1 Starfighter setup was that it was super fast and could outrun everything. So why are we having dogfights and risking Grogu's life? I don't know. Anyway, now we're in hyperspace and there's this lovely little shot of Grogu looking out the window at the hyperspace lanes, and he can see a load of Purrgil outside of it. Now, I did think to myself this was pretty cool. We got to see live action Purrgil, and while I'm not overly keen on the idea of all of this coming together to be like a Star Wars Rebels sequel in live action, I didn't mind it. I enjoyed this little moment. Anyway, so after being told that we're now going to be going on a fetch quest to find new parts for IG-11, we then travel to a completely separate planet in the Mandalorian system, and we go and say hello to Bo-Katan, who's sitting on a throne in a castle. So instead of weaving this segment into the narrative naturally, it's totally forced and out of place, because she basically tells us nothing other than that we're gonna die because Mandalore's a hellscape, and that she's basically given up trying to reunite the clans because she doesn't have the Darksaber, and that if Din wants to do it, he should do it. Then the episode ends. So, in an episode that is 31 minutes long, which by the way is an absolute disgrace considering every other major TV show around is about an hour to 50 minutes, we've managed to go to 3 planets, use the first 10 minutes to establish the overarching narrative while totally forgetting about the huge significant cliffhanger from season 2, and we managed to waste another 15 minutes of the show setting up a fetch quest for the next episode or 2 that does not need to happen and is going to be a complete waste of time, I can already tell you now. That is literally the entire point of this episode. Setting up a fetch quest. And of course, there's loads of little shots with baby Grogu doing really cute things, because that's what this show is about. Now, I really don't like to use the word filler too often, but for the opening of the biggest Star Wars TV show around, they somehow managed to make this episode feel pointless, they somehow managed to make it feel like filler, and it was just really, really poor. Yes, they have established the overarching narrative within the first few minutes, but now the next episode or 2 are going to completely forego this narrative to do something else that's utterly irrelevant and shouldn't even be happening, other than that the writers wanted a bit of fan service and a bit of nostalgia from earlier seasons of the show. Great. But for me, the good thing is, the bar is pretty damn low with this opening episode, and I don't really see how things can get any worse, so I'm really just hoping that with such a weak opening, we do have some really wonderful episodes to look forward to. There is a lot of interesting stuff they can do with Mandalore, there's a lot of interesting stuff they can do with the psychology of Din Djarin, and his redemption arc, I guess, and how maybe he can figure more about the Mandalorians and how maybe this redemption isn't as redeeming as he thinks it is. So we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, I personally thought this episode was really weak. I thought the writing was lazy, the dialogue was wooden, some good action pieces here and there, but I personally was disappointed with it as a whole. And I know a lot of you guys love The Mandalorian, and I know a lot of you are going to comment on this video saying that I just hate Star Wars and all this rubbish, but I love Star Wars. I want Star Wars to be the #1 entertainment brand in the world because it is my favourite franchise and it deserves to be such because it is incredible. And so to me, when the opening episode of the biggest Star Wars TV show around starts in such a lackluster way, I'm not going to sugarcoat my feelings just so I can maintain some measure of positivity. And we can only see what happens next week, and I have my fingers crossed that things do get significantly better. Anyway, if you enjoyed the review, don't forget to hit the like button, it helps me out a great deal, or the dislike button if you don't agree with it. And if you want to keep up with my reviews for The Mandalorian Season 3, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you are notified when my review for next week's episode goes live. I'll see you guys in the next video. But until then, may the Force be with you. Always.